Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tending to Joy at the End of the World. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations and traditional owners of the unceded land on which we are broadcasting from and on which I write, work, and learn on, the Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to the elders of the lands this broadcast might reach. Sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Anthea and I will be your host for tonight. I'd like to thank the EWF team for all their hard work in putting this event and the whole festival together, and for their time and continuous support of emerging writers and artists. I'm really grateful to be here and to share this virtual space with you all. So, welcome to Tending to Joy at the End of the World. At the start of the pandemic, I sort of began asking myself, what is joy and how do we tend to it in crisis? I started reading a lot and I came across this essay by Zadie Smith in the New York Review of Books, where Smith observes that pleasure tends to mimic joy in minor ways, and because of this, we think of joy as pleasure intensified. But the difference between pleasure and joy perhaps lies in the way we speak. Pleasure is owned, but joy is embodied. Smith writes, "The thing no one tells you about joy is that it has very little real pleasure in it. And if it hadn't happened at all, at least once, how would we live?" I'm so honored to share this virtual stage tonight with Dakota, Ferreira, Brooke, Scobie, Caitlin McGregor, and Lou Garcia-Dolnik. I recently learnt that the word stanza in poetry comes from the Italian for room, or literally standing place. And tonight, these artists will take you through their own rooms of tenderness, joy, and resistance. So I'm going to start the evening off by reading a few poems of my own. Just to introduce myself, I am a writer and poet living in Naarm, Melbourne. My work tends to lie at the intersection of place, identity, and connection through the lens of the diasporic experience, and has appeared in Baby Teeth Journal, Jed Press, Going Down Swinging, and VoiceWorks, among others. I have performed at Spoken Word Perth and Melbourne Writers Festival and was shortlisted for the Dorothy Porter Award for Poetry in 2020. So I always tend to start off my readings with this poem. It's sort of become a tradition, and I guess this poem is sort of an ars poetica. It's called The Poet Falls in Love. Poetry enters, brings me flowers and 100 different words for them. Bloom, spring, the rise and fall of your breaths, comes and shows me a way in a different light, says, here are your metaphors, use them wisely, excessively, abundantly, or not at all. I listen, I write, I turn my hands into blood and paint the skies with my heartache, my falling in love, my wars on land and beneath skin, the sacrifices of a heritage I am only beginning to know again. Poetry enters, I kiss her on both cheeks and once on the nose for good luck. I whisper into her, I didn't realize it was you I was looking for all this time. She says, follow me, and then leads me into the sun, strips me naked and exposes 100-year-old scars. I learned to love myself by writing love letters to every body part I tried to shrink. Poetry enters, tosses my bedroom wild, teaches me how to be angry, curls her hands over mine and says, fold your fingers and swing. I come home with knuckles stripped bare and life gutted right out of me. Over ice, I tell her I am tired as she sings me to sleep. Poetry enters, wears the same skin as mine, has the same hair color, speaks the same language and a half, tells me I am your sister, this is a good fight. This is a good fight. Poetry enters, is the wolf, the moon, the bird with a collapsed wing, is my grandmother, is God, is Eve before the world wanted more from her. Is this new one, is the old one, is my father, my mother, these hands that are both. Poetry enters, is me and this voice covered in dust, is me and these words rising. Poetry enters, sleeps in my bed the first night we meet. Poetry enters, stays for breakfast. So this next poem is the first poem I wrote during lockdown. So I titled it My First Lockdown Poem. The desert cactus in the bathroom blooms. It is so far from what it is used to, and yet 3 flowers open as if it is just doing all that it knows how to do, which is to say, lean into me, sweet friend. This fracturing is all that the heart knows how to do. Lean into me. We are so far from what we are used to. The days don't stop. Clumsy hands, makes tea, records moments, strokes the cat, wipes dust from every leaf. Clumsy hands, makes the bed, bathes themselves in lemon myrtle soap, strokes the body from which it came. The days don't stop. 10 years old, a memory. The sensation of a packet of pop rocks being dispensed into my mouth feels like yesterday. The crackling, the sticking out of tongues to hear the fizzle, the color bleeding into our laughter. Can you hear it? My God, that laugh. My God, that snap, crackle, pop. It must have been love going all in like that. How else to describe the chaos that ensued, the bang and then the fizzle, the sunken fruits on the windowsill plucked before ripened, its sweetness always a dream, always believing. The days don't stop. Another morning of sun breaking through clouds, leaning. Another night of dancing in this room filled with memory, waiting for it to undo the heartbreak. Clumsy hands say, lean into me, sweet friend. So this is my last poem. It's a work in progress. It's something I'm working on with a friend for his EP, and it's currently titled Something Starts to Grow. They say there is a moment when the sun sets where it flashes green before sinking. On the last day, we sit on a hill and wait for the bare edges of the sun to reveal to us another reality, one with an alternate horizon where green is the color of night. I think I missed it, which is why I am still here, breathing into this life, carrying with me a red that devours. What lies beyond the horizon? I kiss your eyelids when I ask this, when I push your body out to water, the currents swallowing the last light. They made the universe into a song. Did you know? Have you heard? It sort of sounds like hearts beating. No, it sounds like expansion, which I guess is the same thing, a kind of reaching towards an unknown, a miracle we cannot wrap our arms around. Something starts to grow and we tend to it. It is the only thing we know how to do with these hands. I can see where the end is for me. It is at the tip of my tongue where a word escapes and launches into the air and becomes something else. No longer the body from where it began, But now, joy. Do you think this is what they meant when they saw it for the first time? A shimmer breaking up dusk and catching light. I linger at the shore and watch as you head towards the green flash. What is hope except a red thread tied around our pinky, the other end lost at the bare edges, waiting? Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to invite Dakota Ferreira onto the virtual stage. Dakota is a Bundjalung man living upon Dharawal and Yuin lands. As a young poet, Dakota has performed for live audiences, including Yours and Ours Festival and the Museum of Contemporary. Dakota's body of work consists of poems, stories, and reflections that critically engage with intergenerational trauma, gender, spirit, and healing, all of which informed the methodology of his recent thesis, which explored Indigenous cultural sovereignty in the 21st century. Dakota is carving out a path as an independent researcher, educator, and advocate for healing country and our communities through art and storytelling. And tonight, he'll be reading a poetic response to the theme titled Water and Smoke, as well as the dreaming story of Wadbiliga. Please welcome Dakota.
Thanks, Anthea. And I'd like to echo your acknowledgement at the start. I'd like to acknowledge on Dharawal lands on the south coast of New South Wales, and extend that acknowledgement out to the old people and all of those lands that we're all tuning in today. I'd also like to acknowledge any Indigenous peoples tuning in today, and thank you for taking your time out of your evening to listen to what I've got to say on the theme, Tending to Joy at the End of the World. I have written a poem in response to that, titled Water and Smoke. It's accompanied with a visual story that will play when I begin the poem. I'm a Bundjalung man. I've been writing poetry for the last several years, and it's a great honor to be a part of the Emerging Writers Festival. So thanks. All right. I had a dream of water and smoke, of a humpy on a hill at the end of the world. It was filled with uncles and aunties who stir in conjunction black tea and native honey. They confront me. Run along, son, and keep our fire going. Don't forget, son, keep our river flowing. Because in the end, the world will need water and smoke. Now twilight floods my eyelids. Every sunrise I rebuild that humpy in my mind's eye. I savor the flavor of native honey, while sweet water rivers rejoice my naked body. I find joy in upholding the East Coast way. Step 1, identify stringy bark spirit and ask permission. Yet not in terms of property or legality, I mean ask the tree, respectfully and with humility. Though before step 1, you must complete step 0, start a fire, but with permission. Not in terms of lawful fire permittance, consult the wind and ask the fire spirit. Smoke the tree from head to toe, say the words and by then you should know. See, smoke like ochre exists in between matter. In between what you see as solid, liquid, and gas is where spirit resides. Outside the confines of popular ideological jurisdiction, culture reminds us to move with conviction, in between matter. Between the magnificence of presence and what actually doesn't matter. See, the catharsis is in the space between you and me. The energy we exchange, even connecting digitally. The invisible currency between we and the world around us, this is where I find joy. Though joy is mistaken as a commodity, worn around the necks of superficial officials, fighting for our checks like warriors of the new world, fighting our way out of the apocalypse in shining hedonistic armor, I've known no better. At times I found joy purging my narcissism in bathroom mirrors, or laughing at N's face riding the drunken joyride that is life. I used to escape in the taste of eclectic electricity that I found in the corner of her lips, or in the bottom of this drink, or spelt at the end of this sentence in between her hips. Though should we escape the end of the world under the dirty sheets of facetiousness or nuances that complete us. In 1966, as legend has it, a black boy was born in the eye of a storm. He kept running just to stay warm. He rode horses in the rain just to stay dry. An anomaly for a Borai born in Redfern before a referendum could apparently acknowledge his existence. Found himself in 95, running backwards towards the eye. Found himself healed when he tripped over her heels. Found himself on a hill in a house that was built, staring down a valley on Ewan country. Found himself with family and found joys in days spent by the creek. Born away from water and unaccustomed to the right smoke, other young men die either of thirst or drawn to the wrong smoke. Tending to joy as a black boy can feel like a journey of limbo. So I tell my brothers I hear you and I love you. And I tell my others that storms have eyes and are misunderstood beyond contact. I tell my others that at the end of the world, beware. You might just have to fight for shelter or a university degree. You might just have to decide what you need more urgently. Though heed me, we never ceded our sovereignty. Though don't worry, at the end of the world there'll be a welcome to country, and I'd like it if you join me in my humpy for some black tea and some native honey. As long as before you leave this world, keep that fire going and keep that river flowing, because the world needs water and smoke. That's the end of the poem that I wrote for this particular theme. It obviously has different meanings to all of our different perspectives, and I'm really grateful to be able to share my voice on the platform, and I'd like to thank emerging writers. Thank you listeners for taking the time out of your evening, and I hope you join me in listening to the rest of the beautiful authors that are going to read their works or present what they've written. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota. Sorry, I was just on mute. That was absolutely beautiful. Next, I'd like to welcome Brooke Scobie. Brooke is a queer, gory woman, single mum, emerging writer, and community worker. Brooke was born and bred on Bidjigal country and now lives on Darkinjung land. Since her days of bad teenage poetry, Brooke has been fanatical about words. As a writer, she is dedicated to telling stories that center Black identities, queer love, family, and unpacking some of the big issues that can affect First Nations, communities, and countries. She is most passionate about creating tales and poems for all the weird kids that need to see themselves in fantastical stories of joy and adventure. Please welcome Brooke.
Thanks, Anthea. Jingiwala, everyone. I'm Brooke. I'd like to acknowledge the unceded Darkinjung lands where I live and speak as a visitor tonight. My family belongs to Bunjalung Jugan, but since my nan's removal, we've lived all over Darug. For everything Darug has given us and for sustaining us, I pay my respects to country, to ancestors, elders, and our babies. As blackfellas, the end of the world has been happening to us since invasion. We have learnt and relearnt ways to hold, protect, and create joy. in the ever-present apocalypse. Sometimes that joy is a future imagined. I would like you to imagine with me tonight. Focus your mind now. Smell the wattle behind me and deeply listen for the joy. Though it may be fleeting in this piece, it is real. This piece is called Always and Again. Joy doesn't live here. Not really. Not for us. Iron strokes of concrete colony split country in two. Paper mache skull, melted sky saliva, and silver lichen. Here, where the world has ended 251 times under and again, here with you. Without us, joy is a liar, a thief. Our river-lined and secret truth, joy is in spirit. Living tendrils, growing emerald, curled around synapses, alive and dreaming. In our sibylline desires of a future where was, is, was, always, and round. Collective sight, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Grandmother Melaleuca twists titanium spines, lantana and cinderblock dust. Pyre ships billow, blackened and rusted. Night thrones of glass shard sand no longer rise to meet the sea, beset with carcala. Bellies full of thunderous silence, lines undrawn flow from parted lips, and joy is real, for she lives here with us, soft, underfoot, once tended, tender, land back and stood back. Joy is, was, is, always, and again.
Thank you, Brooke. That was amazing. Oh my goodness. Yeah, wow. Next, I'd like to welcome Caitlin McGregor. Caitlin is an essayist, editor, critic, and library worker who lives on unceded Jarrah land. She has been a nonfiction and poetry editor for VoiceWorks, an express media judge for the Hachette Prize for Young Writers, a writer in residence at the Moen Recital Centre, and a recipient of the Kate Muscat Highly Commended Award. You can find her work in a range of publications, including Kill Your Darlings, Overland, Meanjin, The Guardian, The Big Issue, and Going Down Swinging. Caitlin is currently working on an essay collection about care. For tonight's piece, Caitlin asked some of the people she loves to tell her about the joys in their lives and how they look for joy in times of crisis. The result is an oral essay that brings a range of voices, memories, and experiences of joy together in a collective response to the idea of tending to joy at the end of the world. Please welcome Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Anthea. Hi, everyone. Tonight, I am joining you from Jarrah land, and I pay my deepest respects to this country and the ancestors and elders of the Dja Dja Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who are its traditional and rightful custodians. As a settler, it's a complicated honour to be adding to the rich history of storytelling on this land tonight, and to honour and celebrate community building and joy as an act of resistance on stolen country which always was and always will be Aboriginal land. When I think about joy in times of crisis, the period of time that comes to mind for me on a personal level is the year 2017. That year, my son Oscar, who was 3 at the time, and I were living in a little apartment on Woiwurrung country in so-called Brunswick West. I was studying my undergrad degree. We didn't have much money, which was stressful. It was my 4th year of being a sole parent. In April, Oscar was diagnosed with diabetes, and towards the end of the year, Oscar had 2 surgeries in which he had to go under general anaesthetic and then be in leg casts for 2 months, then had to relearn how to walk. I also had my heart broken that year and spent a lot of time dramatically crying to the sound of the incessant dripping in the kitchen as there was a leak in the roof that the real estate agent kept refusing to fix. But there were other things I started doing that year too. I became obsessed with videoing the patterns that the sunlight made on the walls as it came through the bushes outside the window. And I spent literal hours, as anyone who follows my Instagram stories will probably recall, watching and recording the movements and behavior of a little praying mantis that I found on one of my houseplants. In other words, I became very good at finding joy and a sense of wonder in little things that I could find on my own, in my own little space. In the midst of the stress I was experiencing, this was a survival technique. When I started to think about what I wanted to say tonight about joy in times of crisis, I remembered another thing about that year. In 2017, I met the couple who lived across the landing from us. Their names were and are Winnie and Real, and they very quickly became a lifeline for me. They invited Oscar and I around to their flat to help them break their fast at 5 p.m. almost every day during Ramadan. Winnie and I swapped plant cuttings, and they trusted me to look after their apartment when they went away. These memories of joy and connection in crisis reminded me of something that I'm not very good at and continue to try to work on, which is reaching out for help and pushing outside my comfort zone to build and contribute to community. With that in mind, I decided that for tonight's project, I was going to do exactly that and ask some of my friends and family to help out and contribute to this project. And the result of that process is the audio of the video that you're about to see. I'd just like to thank everyone whose voices are about to be shared. I'm so grateful for the trust and the opportunity to have worked with your thoughts and memories for this piece. And the last thing I will say before I ask Kat and Millie to start the video is that Winnie and Real are now 2 of my absolute best friends in the world, and they've moved up to Jara country with me and teach me how to build real community every day. And they've had a shit time recently. And so Winnie and Real, I'm not actually sure if you're listening tonight, actually, but if you are, the parts of this piece that are mine to dedicate, I would like to dedicate to you. And I hope it brings you a little bit of joy. I love you both very much. Thanks, Kat and Millie, whenever you're ready.
The crises that are taking up the most headspace at the moment are directly related to the federal government.
It's kind of immense pressure at all times and a real tiredness.
It was the fucking shittest time I have had for a long time. I don't think I have cried that much in ages.
It's actually my 5th lockdown, and I feel like each one I've become better at dealing with it and been able to find a lot more joy in the opportunity, I guess, to slow down, tend to my home, tend to my brain.
I think I always find a way to laugh when things are bad.
And it's wonderful to feel the pain of laughter. all our overlapping waking hours that weren't spent beside my grandfather's body in the nursing home, that weren't spent helping my dad arrange the funeral, I spent on the phone with my best friend, and they made me laugh.
I can always rely on my sisters to make me laugh and put things into perspective as well.
I feel joy is an experience I felt often as a child, and that our society really values joy in children. It's not as valued in adult life. I feel like we get really serious.
What brings you joy?
Sometimes sweets.
Sweets bring you joy?
Mm-hmm.
What do you like about sweets?
They're so, like, sweet.
Hoppers. They're these like Sri Lankan rice flour, kind of half dome carbohydrate vessels. And you have it with curry, you can have them in the morning, you can have them with egg or with sambals, and oh my gosh, they're just like the greatest thing that I've ever eaten, and I always feel joyful when I eat them.
Any food or meal that's shared with people that I love and care about, I always find that really special and joyous.
Does anything at school bring you joy?
Work.
Oh yeah, what kind of work?
Super hard work.
I feel joy when a person I love actualizes something that they wanted to achieve, and I can see that they feel good about it.
Over the summer holidays, I started learning how to surf. The feeling when you are brave and you take that risk and it pays off is, I think, a really special one.
That's incredibly joyful, watching learning happen in front of you.
I think prior to COVID, I found opening nights of shows really, really joyous. There's something quite special about sitting in a room full of people and watching them watch something that you've been working on for 6 to 12 months.
And I feel joy when like language comes together with a certain state that didn't have a form before. You know, that experience can be just, you know, interesting on a really basic level, but it also can be like really life-saving. When words come together and offer a shape to something that didn't have a shape before, it can feel really immense.
Music brings me so much joy. Anytime I find a new song, I will exhaust it. Even if it's like a complete have a cry in the shower sort of song, I actually get a lot of joy out of listening to that. It's this very weird contrast between the two emotions.
I think joy, unlike happiness, exists alongside sorrow.
Let's do an example. So I feel happy when I do a really good poo or when I get a really good coffee. But joy is like a bit more of a feeling. It's potentially a bit more sustained.
For me, happiness is a moment, but I don't see a depth in happiness. I see a depth in joy. And therefore joy can not only sustain you, but joy can re-energise you.
The whole night long we just couldn't stop smiling and dancing. We just spent the whole night dancing. I think because we were just so filled with joy, we had to move our bodies.
Hey Caitlin, so I'm about halfway through my run in I think it's the Muckleford State Forest. When I'm out here I think about a lot of things, and I think why I like running so much is because it's kind of the thing that most of all allows me to really think and allows me to appreciate the world that I'm lucky enough to inhabit, and the body that I'm lucky enough to inhabit.
My friend and I set ourselves up on FaceTime and put the same playlist on and danced. And we felt so stupid for about 2 minutes. But then it was just fun and silly.
The joy is like both a deeply embodied experience and for me a deeply out-of-body experience that happens to be simultaneously when I run.
We're all dancing around and I just felt this wave of joy come over me and like happiness come over me, and it really just felt like my heart was full of energy and fun.
Big raucous crowd of people who can't dance dancing together and not feeling any shame. Joy is an absence of shame.
I feel joy when I feel the same liberation from certain, ways that you've grown up and things that you expect are normal about being a boy or being a girl. And you realise that there is all these states of being, and that what you once thought were sort of more rigid ways of having to exist in the world aren't.
I guess I've realised a whole bunch of things about myself this year, and once I looked at those things, I've been a lot more at ease with myself. So I guess joyfulness is more easily facilitated, by my state of mind.
I think trust is important. Finding people or animals that you can trust, because until you are able to trust, it's very difficult to build joy. That's fairly flippant advice, because you can't just say to someone,
go
find someone. Yeah. But what you can say to people is, go and be the person someone else can trust.
It sounds like community building as well.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I'm living in a new house, and it felt really sad and lonely, but now it feels kind of nice. I'm kind of liking it. I had a couple of friends over the other day, and it just made it feel a lot better. It made it feel kind of nice. I guess company brings me joy.
It's interesting when people do share the deep joys, it's always relational.
A lot of my moments that I think of when I reflect on joy, they're all spent with people.
I think I find joy more easily when I'm in the company of other people. I get a lot of my energy from other people.
What makes you feel happy, Kate and Jane McGregor?
You do.
Me, Oscar.
You, Oscar.
So I think some of the most joyful times in my life have been times when I've been by myself or with friends, camping or hiking or skiing or surfing.
Also going for a bushwalk, especially when you stop at some point and just listen to what's going on around you. There's a real joy in not being the centre of your own universe for a second. You kind of realise that you've been taking up all the oral space of the walk, and when you're able to stop and listen to what's going on around you, I feel like it's very joyful to realise the whole world is existing at all times, whether or not you're walking through it.
If you wanted to, you could go around and record different sounds in the garden. That would be cool too. Go find where that bird is chirping from.
I don't think it's drawing a longbow, but the anger that our young people feel around how we're treating the environment, there's a spiritual element to that, because they see that is so important to their connection and life and sources of joy.
I think that there can be joy in protest. Often that is shot through with grief and anger and trauma. But I think that maybe that collective sense of joy that can spring out of political movements, perhaps that's why that joy feels so subversive and so real and so powerful.
My experience of joy in times of difficulty or trauma was really unexpected for me. My dad died almost 2.5 years ago now, and I remember at the time thinking about joy as a concept became kind of almost more prominent. I think because when you're grieving, joy is a really complicated thing to feel or think about, because you feel a lot of sadness and grief and guilt for contemplating the feeling of joy, I think. The joy I experienced was more physical than I've ever had, I suppose. Having someone close to you die really grounds you in the physical realm in some way. You're very aware of your aliveness.
I think particularly in times like this, finding those people who are just joyous, it does feel like an act of resistance.
And I definitely think that joy can be a countercultural act of resistance, for sure. I think that living a joyful life and being able to find those moments of peace is a really powerful thing and a real counter response to misery that's being inflicted upon us by those in power.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was so special to watch and hear. Our last reading of the night will be from Garcia-Dolnik. Lou is a poet and editor working on unceded Gadigal land, a poetry editor for VoiceWorks and alumnus of the Banff Centre's Emerging Writers Intensive. They have been awarded second prize in Overland's Judith Bright Poetry Prize, a place on the shortlist for the 2020 Blake Prize, a Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellowship, and Varuna Residential Fellowship in 2021. Their work has been published in or is forthcoming with Australian Poetry Journal, Going Down Swinging, Liminal, Overland, Rabbit, Running Dog, Runway Journal, Magazine, Scum Mag, and VoiceWorks. Tonight, Lou will be reading 3 poems about tending surrender in the face of loss and unreal grief, how a radical politics of decentering the self in the wake of manifest violences, past and present, entails a submission to what is known but not yet known, felt but yet to be apprehended, and how sitting in communion in the world is a practice of listening and flight. Please welcome Lou.
Hi everyone, I'm streaming from Gadigal land today, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect and gratitude to the custodians of this land on which I live and work. I pay my deep respect to and honour the storytellers, the First Nations that precede me and my kin, that make all creative production on this land possible, that precede all living and being on this land, that continue to exist, live and work on this land in spite of and against the manifest violences of the settler colonial order. My honour, love and deep, deep respect. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'll be reading 3 poems tonight, the first and third recently published in Runway Journal's Divine issue, and the second a persona poem after the character No Face in Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, which was recently published in Running Dog. This first poem is titled A Brief History of Waves. It must have been mercy, the way it opened itself to me, the thick distance of its skin, a motion to moving. Is it synecdoche to say swelling, to say time from terror? A wave is water in the shape of a sobriquet. One knows water by saluting its bending. Saluting the wave is asking obeisance to God in the eye of the rise. The river, I write the poem, though I mean to write waves. Water on water is the logic of the wave. It shirks off its duty to mathematics and becomes itself again and again. Feet first, though what other way to enter water? One cannot stop the rising tide. The wave stops before the ocean subsides and rises. Canute issued his imperative to the wave. Waves dressed him regardless, took his robes and made them waves. Entangled in silt, one might think, I will die and that is good. Hokusai lived in the faith of waves enclosing their vast greeting, hence, here, the naked of me. Entangled in silt, one might think, I will die and that is good. And how many lanterns did they light in Kanagawa? A fisherman's wife laid in bed alone, the first time since her wedding night, but she convulsed in awe to countenance the greatest wave the world had ever seen. Let me look at it, let me set my life on it, and swear to God, to all that is unruly, you will bury me in it. The second poem is a persona poem after No Face. No Face. Plosive wind, barbiturate winter, red bridge for nameless calligraphed creatures, animus after animus, antiquates and anastrophe, ungraving the cosmos of its soft, ghosted night. breathless wind, oleander and zinfandel, the arguments of angiosperms rehearsing their riveted rhythms, converged the disunited light. I earthed my desire beneath me only for grass to grow my silhouette, language a ghost of cloaked clothing so that to see my spirit one saw static, thieving the empty expanse, and words a flock of wings open-mouthed between sound and its capture. And what to call that but time passing through its architectures? Had I not brought my vernacular lost, I would not have entered, my tongue even willing me onward past the broken frames enclosing me, an ensouled voicing lending truth to truism, here recrudesce, the ocean-swept rain pacifying the plural, permeable embers puncturing the solitary, unintentioned attention to take me home. Hunger called me, so I came, spewed my riches, and when I saw what made a body longed for, conquered, stored citizens inside me and retched them from my inventoried abscesses, and who to tell me food doesn't make one warm? I ate so much I forgot I was full, ate so much I grew my words to my mouth, so much to give me form, but the city was only spirits, and how else to say nobody wanted me? And what to call that but language? The way the body keeps one safe is more complicated than hunger. The way hunger fails when held to words vaster than feasting. How to hold my body open but to follow anything with shape, to attached unvoiced hollow to wait. Something solid tells me, take courage. To hold my hands in view of sunset, does it striate me? No name without mouthings, no face without presence. To speak, I say make form. To hold, stay awake. Take courage, make form, stay awake. Take courage, make form, stay awake. The last poem I'll be reading is written after Patty Chang's Invocation for a Wandering Lake. It's titled, Careful, Your Heart is Healing. 23 and still a poem about death, how I can't get enough of it, my weightless feet disrooted of me. After the deluge, the howl, where is my grief? Where did it come? Across, itinerant, the gymnosperms that formless resist flight. All my life I resist flying, my body reticulates me, and so I listen. Who is my grief? A ghost subsuming edges, ocean after which there is no ocean-swept wind sounding its depth, a light-modulating genus fading from field of view, my promise with vastness asks, how is my time? Every moment unasked is an anchoring, just as anchors belie the rudeness of the animal. And anchoring is a place, as grief is emplaced, as is light, which sets my hollow down a wordless cavern. We live beneath the burden of greater things, shifting weightlessly, unsure of what tethers us to obligation or why. I do not know what keeps me here, but I know it is things, the way the rain touches itself in the way I reach to touch, the way memory holds the brain with still. Some things never leave the mind, however plastic. Some things need undertaking before time is taken. I am nowhere near forgiveness, but I am near how, a directive to be kind to oneself. The world is angry and listen, nothing profound but gentle, nothing innocent but already fading. I learn to tell the world I am falling. I am learning falling precedes flight. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lou. That was so tender. And thank you again to Dakota, Brooke, and Caitlin. It was such a joy to hear all your words and have you be a part of this event. In this world of endings, I am truly hopeful. And I'd like to also thank Kat and Millie for their work behind the scenes tonight, And I'd like to thank again the Emerging Writers Festival for everything that they do. There's so many wonderful events happening over the next week, so be sure to check them all out. And of course, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight. Thank you for your time and attention and for tending to joy with us. Take care, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you.